Good morning. Welcome to Move's webinar. It is a pleasure to be with all of you today. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about business models, innovations for electric mobility. It is terrific that we have a great guest speaker today. So we're going to be talking with Nura Kurakira. She is coming in representation of the company NLX. She's the head of business development for Latin America, and it's great to be hosting the webinar today and have her presence. So the idea of the conversation today is to kind of understand what are the key aspects for successful business models in electric mobility in the region. And we're going to be talking about the perspective of NLX for the region. Try to understand the main trends and how we can reduce risk and costs and overcome the main barriers in the sector. So welcome, Nura. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to Move's webinar. And yeah, so the floor is yours. We would like to have a little bit of more of an introduction of your experience and then hear your presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this speech or to this panel. I'm very glad to be again with you. Today we are going to talk about one very important topic. As you know, we passed through a difficult moment right now during this period of COVID. And as we know, one of the most important things in our life is transportation. We need to move from one place to another, and it's very important to understand what are the best alternatives we have and how to improve the quality of the people's life and how we can everyone do something to make also the environment to improve the quality of the environment, and how to be more responsible of using our own transportation, and how also the cities and the private companies can provide some support and build electric mobility ecosystem or a zero emission or low emission transition for this. Regarding me, I'm Nura Kwakira. I'm Peruvian, but I live in Colombia since 8 years ago. I started my career in electric mobility living in China while I was working with electric mobility manufacturer. They also build like energy storage and other new energy solutions. Then I moved into the new energy or the utility company business, right? Working with companies as Engie, also a company in US from California, that they develop also electric mobility and solutions. Now, being part of NLX is a very huge step for me because we are leading the path for electric mobility, not only in LATAM, not only in the region of Latin American countries, but also worldwide. And we believe that innovation is a key process we need to do in order to always be on top, to find the way, the solution about circularity, how to build smart cities, how to be more green efficient, and that's what I'm doing right now. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nura. So as we wait for you to share your screen and your presentation, I invite all the audience to include their questions in the comments of the YouTube channel. At the end of Nura's presentation, we're going to be reading the questions and trying to answer some of the questions that you placed for us. Um, so as you know, we're having this panel in English, but if you feel more comfortable to share your questions in Spanish, we can translate them as well. So you're welcome to do so. We are aware that we have people from all the region connected, so feel free to also share your questions in Spanish.
Excellent. So if you're ready, I can share my screen now. Yes, right?
Yes, yes. Let us know if you're able to share or if you have some issue.
Okay. So I will start sharing one video that I think is very important for you to check what's the trends in Latam, what it's in this case NLX doing in Latam. So let me know if you can listen to this video. I just
Hace 10 años nos descarbonización de nuestras ciudades y mejorar la calidad de vida de todos sus habitantes. Instalamos el primer punto de carga eléctrico de Latinoamérica, soñando que un transporte más limpio y eficiente era posible. Una década movilizando oportunidades y potenciando alianzas público-privadas que nos permiten ofrecer un ecosistema integrado de soluciones, aportando desde el financiamiento de flotas de e-buses hasta la implementación de sistemas de gestión de carga inteligente e infraestructura energética. Logros que hoy celebramos: más de 1.300 buses eléctricos, los primeros electroterminales en la región y más de 2.300 puntos de carga inteligente. Tecnología y digitalización al servicio de las personas, un beneficio para miles de usuarios que viven a diario la experiencia de un transporte sustentable. La movilidad eléctrica traspasa las fronteras, uniendo al continente desde el extremo más austral de América del Sur hasta América del Norte, gracias a la primera ruta panamericana 100% eléctrica, conectando lugares y personas con energía limpia y asequible. Sigamos avanzando juntos, acelerando la transición energética y promoviendo modelos de desarrollo circular que garanticen ciudades más limpias, seguras, resilientes e inclusivas, impactando positivamente la calidad de vida de las personas y en el medio ambiente.
Perfect, Nira. We were able to hear it well. I know
okay.
that for our English speaking audience, yeah, maybe we can share a little bit about what we saw in the video, Nira, and mention a little bit what we just heard.
Yeah. So just as a summary of the video, you can see that NLX has been working since more than 10 years in the electrification path, starting with the electric chargers, right? Infrastructure, because as you know, we used to have the first question is like, what comes first? The infrastructure or the electric vehicles. We believe that right now we need to focus in everything as an ecosystem, and we believe that we are ready right now to implement the solution of electric mobility, especially in public transportation. And we need both, of course, we need both. But first, it's work that we need to do in alliance or building PPPs, that is the public-private alliances, so we can have smart solutions. So that's there were some examples, as you see, in the different countries in the region that we are developing the electric mobility. As a big example, we have the case of Santiago de Chile in the region, and also Colombia. We have cities like Bogota that are leading the path. We are going to have more than 1,500 buses operating in Bogota city, and also we will have more than over or around 2,000 electric buses operating in Chile very soon, thanks to the last tender. So as you know, now we cannot say that we are talking about the future, we are talking about the present. So let me show you what are the trends and what are the opportunities we are having right now in the region. I will share a very quick presentation, but please, you can start formulating your questions that we can solve at the end of this presentation. So let me share again the screen very fast. Here, just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it, Nira.
Perfect. Just a starting point, as I was telling you, after this affection about COVID, we need to know that the governments, the city, are working very hard how to do the best effort to integrate their public transportation systems due to the low demand of the transportation. You know that we had a lot of concern about using this because of the pandemic, But now the challenge is even bigger for the cities to build new technology or cleaner technologies systems, because the demand of the transportation has been decreased. Even that right now we are getting to the point to going back to the previous demand is a huge effort that we all need to do. And with we, I mean everyone. Like I want to mention, like, not only public, private companies, but also us. We usually use our private cars to transport, and we should start to think in other ways of transportation to contribute with the environment, right? So let's see what we are doing. Like, the evolution of the energy sector is growing very fast, and the energy is experimenting a transformation of digitalization and customer centricity that can change the world. So for us, our pillar is how to build a decarbonization cities, how to electrify the fleets, how to make it smart. You know that the data or the information that we can get through these new kind of technologies is very valuable, and how to comply with the new customers' needs. So NLX was born to create a new power economy, transforming the energy into power for everyone, building a new ecosystem with circular economy, right? So I will go very fast through these slides to talk about the EVA segment. As you know, we are offering this new proposition that is to make an approach with a turnkey solution that can be modular. We will be part of the solution since the beginning, how to design, how to implement the electric mobility, working as an advisor, how to supply the solution, how we can be more efficient, not only in the charging infrastructure, but also using the digital platforms that could provide more efficiency savings to the operators, and savings at the end to the end users and also to the cities. This modular solution have a different models that we created since some years ago, starting with the case of Chile that I will show you later. And also we need to choose what would be the application area. We can use it in the public transport. We can use it in the private segment. For example, nowadays, you know that the school bus service are using very old fleet and more very very polluted electric buses that the kids are using right now. So now it's also a priority, not only for the private companies to start introducing these clean technologies, but also in the case of the schools, right? So we are starting in these key points. Even in the field of airports and ports, we know that we are not counting about the emissions that the air segment is giving to the world. So we also need to pay attention how we can decrease these emissions in these fields, right? So the key benefits, as you know, about electric mobility, there could be more than 70% of savings in the operational cost and also the consumption. We need to learn how to monetize this asset flexibility, and we know how to do it, and how to also make an impact or a change on the top of mind of people with a very high quality service. Okay, so what we offer is an end-to-end service that it's our advisory since the planning of the fleet, because we need to know how many buses we can start to change in one depot. Let's say depot, I say depot to the terminal, let's say, of the buses, or we can even build a big electro terminal for different companies. That's a way to work in an efficient way. As you know, it's not only building charging infrastructure, we also need to take in consideration what would be the change in the demand of the energy in one sector. So it's very important to make it with a plan, and also like how to make it more smart, right? Then we can also offer like the ticket payment, the smart charging platform is very important to make this more efficient. Um, Before, the chargers was not so intelligent, we call like the silly chargers, but nowadays we have a lot of options to be more smart and to get more data. This data will be translated in information, very key information for the government to create more efficient routes, to improve the service for the people, and also to reduce the cost for the operators or the transporters, right? We can also build ecosystem with the usage of the PVs or solar panels. We can also use the energy storage. And we are also thinking what's going on after this solution. We are already working on the second life of the batteries, because many people is asking right now, okay, your electric car have this lifetime, let's say 16 years. As you know, one battery has more or less 8 years of warranty, but you can still use it, right? The first package of battery will reduce the energy capacity in about 30 or 35%. It depends of the supplier or the warranty that you get. But what's going on after that? So I heard many people that has many doubts about the new technologies, and they say, okay, what's going on with the battery after the usage of in the transportation field? Then you will have some materials and you need to process it. We are not ready. Well, I tell you that we are already working in the second life of batteries, and we can make it this additional can be 4,000 cycles, additional cycles to the 6,000 initial cycles that we are going to use it in the transportation field. So we already have a plan to do it here in Latam, starting in countries with, like example, in Chile and Colombia and Brazil, where we are already developing this solution. Also, the data, as I told you, is very important to define what would be the best routes. We can start building in the cities some ring corridors to start and to use it with a more efficient route that we can find for the electromobility, because as you know, as an advantage that we have with this technology is that we have regeneration brake, where you can even save more money, and also decide what route could be more cost efficient. And in this way, you can have the biggest benefit, or the biggest benefit, and show it in the city, and make that the people can start to make some change and believe and trust again in the public transport. Here, as you see, we have different blocks or models how to build a good offer for the government or for the companies. Is to divide one side, the consultancy, the financing, the supply installation, the O&M, that is the operation and maintenance, and the digitalization. So one of the biggest challenge or barriers that we used to have was the trust in electromobility, right? As we know, some insurance companies and some financing companies were having many doubts, because they say this is a new thing, but we know this is not real. Not recently. We are working with this technology since many years, but it's true that we have some challenge that we already succeed. For example, the topography of some cities. As an example, in Colombia, we have Medellin city that has a very challenging topography or geography. And of course, we need to adapt the technology to the different cities or geography, and the technology right now is ready. So as a part of the solution, Enel offer also the financing. We are not a bank, but we decided to do this model that we call IVAS as a service in order to start building the trust that the banks right now can give, the funding can also give. So the main point was to show that this is feasible, right? So here we divide the models into the electric public transport projects with charging and energy efficiency infrastructure that we will include, as I say, green energy with solar panels could be, energy storage, and the smart city services that we can offer. Here we can see a little bit more of these three blocks as an example, where we can take care or purchase the electric buses. We do a joint venture with another partner, founding partner, where we can offer the full service maintenance, but we know that the operator usually wants to get this field, or they take care about this field because they are more expert on that. And that's how we work with the public transportation. In some cases, for some private companies, they will prefer that we will take care of that, and it's very easy. We just make a mirror contract or side-to-side contract with the supplier, where they will support or guarantee that everything will work fine during the contract time. That should be around 8 years, 10 years, 15 or 16 years. For the block 2, we have all the charging infrastructure, where we are including the chargers. We include the smart platforms, the energy infrastructure, the O&M, that is the operation and maintenance. As you know, we also need to make some change or overhaul to the equipment, and also supply with green energy. We can also provide the demand response and the energy storage. And for the block 3, how to build the electrification designing using different tools. We have partners, different partners to build this city analytics, where we can get the data, we can get the fleet management in order to make it more cost efficient. So at the end, we will supply this kind of model where we will need to work together with the public transport operator or with the municipality or the major city hall, or if it's the case of the private company, directly with them, right? So they can choose what are the topics they need the support from us. And at the end, we can give this solution and how to guarantee a good performance. We can also offer like the charging as a service, where we will just focus in the infrastructure, or the battery as a service. This is a new concept that actually we are offering right now in Brazil. In the case of some transporters or operators can have or are interested to purchase the bus, but they are concerned about the battery or the electric technology. Then in this case, we will take all the risk and be in charge of do a kind of leasing just for the battery. Okay. Then some examples. What we are leading right now, we have managing more than 1,400 electric buses. So I think this is the most important information that I want us to show you, so we can pass very fast to the questions. But it's important to say that we need to build always the end-to-end solutions to make more circular economy. That's the most important thing. Regarding the results, we already have many cases, as I say at the beginning. In Chile, in Colombia, you can already see what are the results, like the 70% of savings. And that's something that we can have information. You can ask me at the end of this presentation. I can also give you my data, my information. But the important thing of these models is how to build innovative solution for the region in Latam or worldwide. In this case, in Colombia and Chile, what we did is to divide the responsibilities. As you know, in the last tender, in the case of Colombia, for example, they divide the responsibilities and the contracts into two. One is the provision contract, right? That would be in charge of who will purchase the assets, who will purchase the buses and the infrastructure, and who will build the depot, right? That is one contract. And the second contract that is signed with the government, or in this case, the transport entity that is called Transmilenio Colombia, would be the operational contract. For the operational contract, this transporter or the company that will be managing this operation, they will take care about the maintenance, the service of the maintenance. They will be in charge also in the maintenance of the not infrastructure, electric infrastructure, but the infrastructure of the offices and so on. And they need to be responsible and sign a contract, private contract between the provision supplier, let's say, in this case could be an L, could be a bank, and the operator, to make sure that the operation will comply with everything what the manufacturer has asked to operate in the best conditions possible, right? In this way, we will ensure that the operation, the quality of the operation, that the performance of the operation would work all together in order to supply a better transportation and to minimize the cost. So that's the important model that we have established here, and it's right now, let's say it's a trend in Latam. Now, countries like Peru, for example, they are ready to start this path of building new tenders, giving this new option, that not only the operator or the transporter should be the owner of the buses. They are now opening the contracts to make to invite another party, another stakeholder, that in this case could be a utility company like us, or could be a bank or a funding or a leasing entity that could support the electric technology. In this way, we will reduce the risk. So that's the speech, or well, something about the new models and trends that we are developing here in Latam.
Thank you, Nura. Thank you very much for the presentation and for sharing the different models that NLX is providing and sharing with the region. I think we lost Nura.
I'm here.
Oh, you're there. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So before moving with the questions from the audience, I do have a question, Nura. I sort of want to understand how the dialogue with governments is happening, right? And sort of who initiates this contact. Are municipalities really reaching out to NLX? And also the second question, after sort of this direct relationship with cities or transit regulators as well, how do you see the role of the national governments, right? So we see these projects happening in like the specific territory with the cities, right? But yeah, how can national governments contribute in this business models? Is there a role for the national government or state government in the case of a federal state like Mexico or Brazil, right? So trying to understand a little bit of the roles of other administration levels.
Well, to answer to your first question, right now we are experiencing different type of work or building the ecosystem in the different countries, right? In some cases, it's the government that they start to build, or they are willing to build their regulation to make this, let's say, low emission transportation, right? And as we always said in the previous speech and the events and the forums, one of the biggest challenge for low emission or zero emission transportation is the regulation, right? The first challenge was the technical myths, let's say, right? That we already show or demonstrate that is we don't have any other myths or afraid to have because the technology is ready. But the regulation is right now one of the biggest concerns of the private companies, of the operators, transportators, and everyone who wants to implement electric technology, right? So, in the case of regulation, we have some cities or countries, it depends of the place, as you mentioned. In the case, for example, in Peru, usually they work a lot with the national government in order to get some regulation and modify some contracts to make this feasible. In the case of countries like Colombia, the cities has a little bit more, let's say, power to build their own regulation or norms or benefits. But at the end, what we are experiencing is that many cities right now they are approaching us, approaching NL, or approaching entities like you, like MOVE, like ONU, to get some advice, to get some ideas how to start to develop the ecosystem. So we are experiencing more proactive cities, proactive government. They are trying to find a way of building the regulation, building the ecosystem, and also looking for the right partners, right? But there's also the other side, as you mentioned, that we see maybe in some cities or some places that we can see that there's potential. For example, if we see that a city has a lot of sun powers, and we can take advantage of that green energy and build more, build the transition of clean energy, then we also approach them, right? Right now, we have a very big movement, not only in Latam, in the Caribbean, in Mexico, and also we need to take in consideration what is the energy matrix of the different countries, right? Here, for
Mhm.
example, in Colombia, we have more than 75% of our energy is clean energy, right? But we
Yeah.
have countries that they are diverse. Let's say, as an example, Mexico, we don't have this case. But even that the matrix, the energy matrix, is totally opposite to the one in Colombia, they feel that they need to start building the regulation and the policies and try to start making the tenders for electric, or giving some support for the electric mobility, because they know it's not only about the energy matrix, it's also about the health of the people, and it's also about the smart city, how to build a smart city. So we have both cases, and we see every day that all the cities and the government are more proactive. So in many cases, there are entities like NL, like you, like Move ONU, or
Mhm.
any other partners that we have, that they are very proactive. But nowadays, I think and I consider that more cities are getting also this as a main topic, as a big concern of how to
Mhm.
build this transition. Mhm.
Thank you, Nira. Yeah, we agree with you. We can see that there are a lot of cities that are ahead, and we're seeing mid-sized cities and smaller cities trying to get there. And we are currently collaborating with them and trying to work with them to see how they can move towards the regulations, the business models, the sort of technical specifications as well that have to be in place, right? But yeah, we're definitely seeing that some major cities are doing a proactive job, as you mentioned, and it's important to celebrate those, right? But also to recognize the differences that exist within the same countries, right? Because the capacity of a capital city is so different than a smaller city, or and across the region as well. You know, bigger countries and smaller countries. So yeah, moving to other questions now from the audience, because I do want to sort of take their questions as well. One of the questions is about sort of participation of the public in this sort of proposals, right? So I guess that's like how you're seeing the cities, right? Because I understand that that's the role of the cities and the government to incorporate, public participation throughout the different sort of stages of electric mobility projects, right? And maybe as well, like what is the perspective of an NLX of sort of participatory input during sort of transit. A lot of times transit projects, are imply a lot of reforms, right? That may have an impact on the public, and public perception is important. So I guess the first question is related to that. What is sort of the vision of an LX with public participation in transit projects?
Yeah, as you mentioned, our role in this field, how to say, what we realize as a company. We are a utility company. We are not a bank. We are not a bus supplier. Actually, we consider that we are agnostic with technology. Let's say we always choose a different technology for the different cities according to the needs, right? To the budget, and also what is the preference of the operator or the transporter that they will be at the end, the ones that would be in charge of making this service happen, right? So what we do believe is that the electric transportation can be the icebreaker, right? We call this is the icebreaker for the cities to become more circular and efficient. Because when we start to talk about electric mobility in the cities, in the countries, with the government, the possibilities or the how to say, the solutions or the innovation open the door to many other things. So when we talk about electric mobility, we not only talk about one kind of technology, we are talking about how to be more efficient, how to start use green energy, right? Like now, for example, in Chile, all the electricity is green, it's clean, right? In Colombia, I think almost all of the depots, or maybe 80-90% of the depots, use clean energy. So as a role for us is to start to build or start to have this icebreaker for the cities and the government that will open the door to what's coming next, right? As I mentioned, and I see that somebody asked here in YouTube, is there a battery disposal or battery second life plan? David Barrett, the asked by
Yeah.
YouTube, and that's what I was talking. Like, it's not only about the transportation, it's not only about the technology or the chargers. And to answer this question, there is a plan. We can have different ways to reuse the battery, as I was explaining in the speech. Like you have the first cycle, let's say, or the first life could be around 6,000 cycle of the battery usage. And to put us as an example, one cycle is every time you charge completely until 100 and you discharge the battery. So for example, let's say you use the battery for one day, maybe 250 kilometers one route. So you charge at the beginning of the day, and then the bus come back and need to charge again. That is one cycle. Every time you use completely the battery, right? So you first have around 6,000 cycles. That's what the average, what the battery supplier offers. And after these cycles, what happens is that you don't need to give a final disposition to the battery, because you still have the capacity to reuse it for a second life plan, right? This means that you still have between 70 to 75% of energy capacity that probably you cannot use it as a transportation, because you need to comply with some daily average or daily autonomy, right? That after the 16 years, you don't have the capacity, let's say, to run the 250, you will just have 180 or 200, let's say, as an example. that is not efficient for the transportation, but you can take out the batteries and use it in a second life that could last for over 4,000, 3,000 additional cycles. So we
Okay.
already have a plan. We already have a customer to build that. So for us, it's very important to identify what is the market, what are the needs, in which field could be more efficient. We already have a team in the innovation area working on that. I can just start to say I shouldn't be a spoiler, but we can start to mention that we will start our pilots in Latam. In Chile, for example, we already have set up our partners, and we will start making this second life of battery to show that we have another potential, and we are trying to find what would be the benefits for today, right? How
Mhm.
to express this second life battery into a benefit for the offers of today, right? How to reduce the cost and how to measure this new value that we will have for the batteries. So that's something that we already have a plan, and I think we will give more news in the coming months.
Thank you, Nira. No, and thanks for sort of sharing a little bit of ahead of what is coming. I think it's important for the audience to be aware of this potential pilot projects that are emerging in the region. And going back to your answer, I think we agree with what you just mentioned of e-mobility sort of as a change of paradigm, right? And of changing a lot of things, not just the electrification of mobility, right? But really potentiating the use of renewable energy, sort of forcing, transit operator regulators to sort of optimize the routes, of sort of improving the services, of using technology for monitoring the operation, right? Sort of all this digitalization. So that's sort of a conversation that we are having with all of the countries in the region. But one of sort of following up to my next question is one of the challenges that we see is that there are so many of these things that have to come with an e-mobility project, and we see that there are smaller cities that are still not ready to do such a big move, right? And we
Yeah.
see that the change of paradigm is progressive, right? So in that way, how does NL see? Is NL also working with sort of smaller pilot projects in transport, not just necessarily the battery part, but like how do you start in a city that's mid-sized city? They're not ready to move to like a big fleet, right? They're not going to be able to do what Colombia is doing or Santiago is doing. What are some of the chances or options for mid-sized cities, right? How do they start?
Yeah. First, what we have been doing is like to bring the experience to the cities, even no matter if it's a big city or if it's a small city. What we first do is try to bring that experience, the results, the information, or if we have the chance to move one electric bus to one city to really experiment, like to break some myths for the transporters and the government, we do it. We are working on that. We are choosing what are the medium or small cities, as you mentioned, that really have some issues in terms of pollution or in terms of transportation. We need to remember that in Latam, in the case of Latam, we have like let's say the formal transportation, that is like the ones that belongs or have one entity, like one local entity, the transportation entity that will manage like the tariff, the payment and everything. But we also have a kind of informal transportation that
Yeah.
it's very common here in the region, right? Where the first step is not only to talk about technology, is how to build this change in order to make it more formal or in order to manage better the transport. So the first step is to work together with the government to find the best solution, how to implement the payment tickets, right? uh, how to define the tariff, that is very important because as we know that we passed through this pandemic situation, the demand decreased a lot, And if we put all the tariff into the demand, then it's not so possible to make a good quality of service, right? So that's very important to analyze case by case what could be the first steps. But usually, what we do is like we make the approach in the cities, select what would be the best cases to have to supply with a bus or the results, and start having a working tables with local entities, to talk with private entities, because in some cases Enel is not the distributor, let's say, of the energy, and we want to build one project, let's say, for 5 buses, 10 buses. So we need to work together with the local energy company how to build this new ecosystem, right? We need to work with the government and the operators and also the insurance company. We realized that the insurance companies is also, it was a very challenging topic to take, to have, or to solve while we were developing these projects. But we do efforts for the small cities. Of course, the model, the business model can be different, totally different.
Exactly.
In some cases, what we realize that some cities mm, want to apply for maybe some green funds, or they want to apply for some support of from other foundations, right? To start buying by themselves, by the government, to get the first fleet, let's say 5, 10 buses. That's a good start. If the city has the possibility to start being the first one to make this transition and also to apply the new payment methods, that would be perfect, right? But if it doesn't happen, then we also invite the operators or the transporter that already experience electromobility, that trust the electromobility. I can mention one, like the first one, like that raised the hand and made this electrification possible in the case of Chile was Medbus, let's say. These operators say, raise the
Yeah.
hand, say, I want to be the first, and we build the first case like in Latam, like, I mean, big case, because we have other smaller cases. But if we can invite these operators that already trust, already have the experience, to come and support or build new companies, or in some way get involved into these smaller cities, that would be wonderful. So all the effort that we can make, we as a utility company, I invite the, as I say, like the banks and the different stakeholders can also focus in these small cities. That would be perfect. I know also there is one entity, like C40, that is working with the small cities in Latam.
Yes.
They are doing an excellent job. So I think that's the way, and we should also focus in these smaller cities. But the model could change, right? The model
Exactly.
could change case by case. That's why, for example, I showed you in the previous presentation, we can
Mhm.
offer just the charging as a service, or the EVAs as a service, or in the case of the battery as a service. Some companies that they don't think that they shouldn't be, or they want to keep the assets, right? Because for
Yeah.
many companies or operators, they say, this is my asset, this is the way that I can get financing, right, for my different business. In the case of family business, let's say in the small operators that they are family business, they say, I want to keep the assets. Okay, they can keep the asset, and we can be the expert to build the infrastructure in order to be more efficient, right? So there should be different model for every case. Mhm.
Perfect. Thanks, Nura. I think that sort of a follow-up questions to this is, do you sort of, so you also support then the cities or the smaller cities in this process of defining the alternative models that could work for that place, right? So there's a question from Ana Davila. She's saying, what conditions does NLX consider to start projects in new countries, or what features are needed? And yeah, what are sort of the plans of expansion of NLX in the region, right? So yeah, how do you do that
Yeah.
what are the conditions and how you start building a plan with the city?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so it starts. Thank you, Anna, for the question, and so good to see every time more and more women into the transportation and the new technologies. Is very very. I'm very happy to see this new movement. So thank you, Anna, for the question. And the conditions are simple. We just need to start with a wheel, as I mentioned, like if we see or detect any project, no matter the size, because as you know, also to be efficient, you also need to consider what would be the size of the project or how many buses. That's true. But also to make a real change, we need to consider what would be the impact, for example, in the city, right? So we first need to consider what would be the quantity of the buses that could be transferred, but not only thinking about today. Let's say if you tell me like I want one bus or this city requests one bus, of course it's harder to open a new country, let's say, or a new city like very far from NLX offices or branches. But if we really see a potential, right, that no matter if it's not short term, we can check the medium term or the long term, right? We can start making first evaluations because it's very important. And I cannot say, okay, let's put electric buses in every city, in every corner of Latam. We first need to make an evaluation. So the evaluation could be divided into three parts, right? We need to make a technical evaluation of feasibility, evaluation or study. Technical, why? Because the topography or the geography, the conditions can change. As I tell you, like we already broke the myths with geography, like Medellin as an example, with the huge slopes, and that's very challenging for electric vehicles because the biggest fleets are in China, and as you know, China roads are flat. So the suppliers needed to change or improve the technical condition to make it open to, let's say, climb more slopes, like more than 18 or 20% slopes degrees, right? So first we need to make a technical viability or feasibility study. Then we also need to make the operational feasibility. That with the operation, I mean we should study the routes, right? What would be the more efficient route for also for the electric mobility? Because if we have two routes and we should choose, of course, we will always tend to choose the biggest route or the bigger autonomies because you will reduce the cost as much as you use the electric mobility. If you want to implement electric mobility, you need to run kilometers, run as much as possible so you can close the let's say the not the gap, but to make the financial closure to be faster in terms of time or in terms of money with the usage of the electromobility, right? So that's another condition. And the third one is the economics. We need to evaluate what would be the risk, what would be the financial conditions, right? And when is the time where you consider that you can have a financial closure, right? That, as I mentioned, usually we are working with projects of at least 8 years, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16. In some cities are already starting to think about 20 years. That is challenging, but we are considering that for us. And why the time is so important? Because you have the warranty of the batteries, that is 8 years, as I mentioned before, the cycles that I was explaining. At least you should take advantage of that life cycle, because you know that the cost of a battery can be 50% more or less, could be more than the total cost of the bus. So it's very important to analyze the total cost of ownership. That is something that I didn't mention in the speech that I should, is that when we compare the different technologies, we always talk about the total cost of ownership. And total cost of ownership is the capex, that is the initial value of the asset, and the operational and the maintenance value, right? So that's the total cost of ownership, where we need to set up a timeline. Some cities say like, okay, let's do the project for 2 years or 3 years. No, we don't. This is not the way of thinking about a transition. If we want to take this path, if we want to make a transition, you need to consider what would be the more efficient time. So at least you should work in these 8 years to take advantage of the batteries, right? So this is the first thing. Even for the private usage, let's say a mining company or a oil company, that they also need, they have some compromises with the city, right, to reduce the carbon, to reduce their emissions. They say, okay, my contract, my private contract is always for 2 years or 3 years with the operator, right? They don't purchase their buses. They say, okay, I give a contract to a local company of 3 years. Okay, we need to change that. That's something that we were working with these private companies and explain them. One operator or transporter or family business cannot get all the risks and say, I will buy electric technology for just operate it for 3 years, because you can really get advantage of these 8 or 10 or 12 years. So that's something that we are changing, right? Say, okay, at least sign a contract of 5 years, and then you can put some clause to say that you can renew it for other 5 years, at least, right? The ideal is the 8 years. So that's something that we are working right now, how we can do the change. So the conditions are simple. As I mentioned, there should be first a will, and second, we should make these 3 analyses or 3 studies case by case, right? And then we can open or start a project in any city.
Perfect. Thank you, Nira. And I think we have to go to the last question because we already run on time. But so the last question is moving a little bit from public transport and a little bit of just charging infrastructure. So I think the question is related to interoperability, right? So David Barrett asked that the designs or the types of electric chargers and ports are different depending on the vehicle, right? And the question is, how do NLX decides on which type of chargers to be investing in a country, right? So what goes through that process, right? Do you sort of impose a certain market, or you look at the market and see what electric vehicles are in place? Sort of what is the process to decide which kind of electric charger you're going to be placing in the countries?
Okay, I will try to reply this, and also someone else I see, I don't find, someone else asked also what were like the challenge. Victor Alejandro
Yes.
ask what are the electric infrastructure challenges for the charging station for a local municipality who wants to prospect a fleet of e-buses operation. These two questions can kind of match, so I will try to answer both. The charging infrastructure is very important to be planned and designed together with the size of the fleet, right? So first thing that we need to consider, what will be the size of the fleet, and not of today, because sometimes we think, okay, in this city or with this project, we plan to have, let's say, 10 buses for this year. But then if you're already considering that for the next year, you have to renew the fleet, right? Because the contracts are expiring or because of the demand, you need to think about the mid-term or the long term. One important challenge that Victor was asking is the energy capacity. If you plan to have 400 buses in one spot or one depot, is totally different than just starting with 10 or 20 buses, right? So what we experience is like, first we need to plan what would be the quantity of fleet that you can have in the midterm or in the long term, to find the right places, because it's not only about saying, okay, I have this space, let's build a depot in this place. Many things can happen. That's something that we experience, especially in Bogota. In the case of Chile, we implemented existing depots for the fleets, right? There were these operators or transporters that already have a depot built for buses. They already have the space for the buses, and we just transform it and modify it to make it for electric buses. Of course, there are always challenges because you need to think about what would be the energy capacity and other factors. But in the case of Colombia, where we needed to find the place where to fit 400, 500 buses, is a different story. You need to take consideration not only about the land, right? What would be the condition of the land? You need to take in consideration what would be the permissions about the environment, about the neighbors, because if you will start a civil war there and you will transform this area into a depot, increase the capacity, you also need to talk with the neighbors and build a plan for them, right? So when we do that are the kind of challenge that you need to do, right? That you need to consider, sorry. And regarding the charging ports, how to design the charging ports, it will depend. If we talk about the private cars or the passenger cars, we know that we just need to follow what there is in the market. We cannot say, okay, let's put just European standard, type 2. But we know that there are a lot of brands that they are bringing, I don't know, from US or with the type 1. So we cannot right now impose because we already have more than 10,000 electric vehicles, more or less, for example, in Colombia. So right now we cannot impose. If we had planned this in advance, but usually it won't happen because the car manufacturer, the industry, they want to always bring their own model with their own connector, so it's hard to do it. It would be ideal, but it's not going to happen, not now. So of course we will choose the charging the modules or the chargers according to the what we have in the market right now. In the case of public transportation, right now what we are experiencing that most of the suppliers that we have here in Latam that has the product available for Latam with the technical specification that can comply our geography or topography are Chinese. So right now we have many cases in the case of Colombia that we are using the Chinese port, but in the case of Chile, the government already defined, okay, let's set up that the model, like the charger port should be type 2 or combo 2 in this case. Combo 2 is the CCS2 or combined charging system that is European standard. So they already defined for public transportation, there should be this. So we can adapt to the conditions of the market. Doesn't matter if they use Chinese, type 1, type 2, CCS1, CCS2, we can do it. As I tell you, like we are agnostic and we have different partners. We can build our own chargers or we can work with other brands as an alliance. The most important thing that we need to take in consideration that the charger should be smart. That's a must be smart. We cannot say because I want to save some money, maybe the operator say like I have this brand, X brand, I want to put this brand because it's 1 peso. No, we are doing nothing. We really need the data. We need to be efficient, and the only way is to have a smart charger that can communicate also very well with the bus and can communicate with our platform. So everything is connected, right? So that's
I think
the charging point.
we have to close, Nura, because we already used all the time. But I really appreciate all that you shared today with us today. It was key to hear sort of all the alternatives of the business models that exist, and the possibility of also designing new ones according to the needs of the context, right? So there are possibilities. But I think I want to close with what you just mentioned of the stages of how to implement this. And I think sort of summarizing, right, you mentioned, okay, let's do first is the will, right? So the political decision, the public decision of moving towards these projects. And then the second, right, do all these technical feasibilities to try to find the right path, right? So I think that's key. And it's important to bring that to the table, to the cities, to the countries, right? The importance of sitting together, bringing all the stakeholders, doing all the technical analysis, and then coming up with the best solution for the context, right? So I really appreciate NLX experiences that you guys are sharing with us today. It's key for us to build on those experiences and successful stories and bring those stories to the rest of the region, right? And I hope that we as MOE and NLX continue collaborating to move electric mobility in the region.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the audience, and don't hesitate to contact me. Very easy. I will just give my email is niura.coakira@nl.com or through LinkedIn. I will be very happy to respond as much as I can any question that you have. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Nura. Thank you very much, and thank you to the audience.
Bye,
That's all for
everyone.
today.